Video games are said to be this super immersive experience where you can feel totally immersed in a world, but honestly, video games are kind of just as immersive as any other medium, like a movie or a book. But a good way to make a video game super immersive is that you can put it in VR. With VR, you have a full 360-degree view of the game that you are playing, and this makes you feel as though you are literally inside the video game. And of course, when you have this type of experience, it feels way more immersive than playing a normal video game. The interesting thing about VR is that it's a relatively new technology. The oldest headset that is worth mentioning, at least, was the Virtual Boy made by Nintendo all the way back in the 90s, and that was hardly anything. You didn't really have that 360-degree view. All you had was the goggles put over your eyes. With the Virtual Boy, it literally just looked like you were looking at a TV screen that was 2 inches from your face. It wasn't like you were actually in the game world. It was just a way to make the experience just feel closer to you physically. The Virtual Boy never really made it so you felt super immersed in a game. All it really gave you was eye strain and just a really uncomfortable position to play the Virtual Boy in. It didn't really add anything in terms of immersion. It just existed just as more of a gimmick, honestly. In some of the adverts that Nintendo put out for the Virtual Boy, it showed people laying on their backs with the goggles over their eyes and the controller in their hands. But who wants to play a game console lying down? It looks so uncomfortable. And with the goggles laying on your eyes and no strap to hold them in place, wouldn't they just fall off your face? So how did Nintendo expect you to play this thing? And if they didn't put much thought into this, why would they think this would ever sell well? And why would this not get backlash? They should have expected this from the moment they released it, because it looked a little lazy, and also the technology was way too far out there for the time. And the technology needed to make this a fully fleshed out VR headset was way too far ahead in the future for the year of 1995. This concept of being more immersed in a video game was pretty much abandoned after the Virtual Boy, because it had a lot of problems, like people reporting eye strain and people just not knowing how to play the damn thing. After this, the next instance of a big company trying out VR for a video game type console was with the Samsung Gear VR headset in 2015. This headset used smartphones, more specifically Samsung branded smartphones, as the VR headset. The problem, of course, with this VR headset is that it used Samsung smartphones, which was an issue because not a lot of people had Samsung phones in 2015. So that was kind of a niche market to begin with. But then you added on top of that VR, which was still relatively in its infancy, and you just made your audience really, really small. So this didn't really go anywhere, and just having your smartphone 2 inches from your face was a nice step in the right direction, but it wasn't quite what people imagined when they imagined VR. Implementing VR technology into a smartphone app was an interesting idea. It kind of expanded the bounds in which you could use your smartphone, but honestly, it wasn't ideal for VR gaming. There were very basic apps that you could use for this VR headset, and the games that were in these apps were small micro games that weren't really full-fledged experiences. After the flop that was the Samsung Gear VR, we would have a slew of very mixed VR experiences. First, on March 26th of 2016, we had the Oculus Rift. This was a weird corporation to bring you VR, but whatever, it worked. For Facebook's first rodeo into VR, this was very bare bones compared to what they would accomplish later on down the line, but for their first time making a VR headset, this isn't bad. There are a few decent minigames, but other than that, it's kind of passable, and really no reason going back to it. For the first Oculus, or the Oculus Rift, we'd have games like The Climb, Project Cars, and Discovering Space. Some of these, like Project Cars, were a full-fledged game, whereas The Climb and Discovering Space I would classify more as just VR experiences. They weren't really story-driven or really level-driven games, which is fine because at this point Facebook was really just trying to test the waters and see if people were even interested in them making a VR headset. You did have Beat Saber, which was, I would consider, one of the full-fledged games that first came out for VR, and this was really the system seller for the first Oculus, and many of the Oculuses moving forward. This was people's first real great impression of what VR could be. And this one game, I would say, is what really sprung the idea of VR into full swing. So these are good just on their own, but if you are looking for more VR games, this wasn't quite it. Next, we have the PSVR. The PSVR, as the name implies, was made by PlayStation, and the PlayStation 4 around this time was also out. So they used the PS4 as the main way that the PSVR would function. It would constantly have to be hooked up to the PS4, but the upside to this was that it was able to get a lot more out of VR this way. Games like Batman Arkham VR, Until Dawn Rush of Blood, Farpoint, Fireball Zero Hour, and Doom VFR were all full-fledged VR experiences as opposed to just one-off 30-minute mini-games. These were all full-fledged games that would stack up against real console games. And that was a huge milestone because it felt like up until this point, VR had to totally separate itself from original console experiences just because VR was not capable of being both graphically impressive and a full-fledged experience at the same time. Most of the time, they compromised a game length over its graphical quality. Some of the most notable games on PSVR were Minecraft and Skyrim. These were two giant IPs, and the fact that PSVR was able to have these as exclusive games for their platform definitely gave them quite the boost in sales, because these were the games that people were buying PSVRs for now. Now, these had the exact opposite problem. They were very, very long and drawn out games, but their graphical appearance was lacking. But these were a lot more few and far between, and these are just kind of outliers in the PSVR catalog. The next major step in VR technology was yet again taken by Oculus. Now, at this point, Oculus had fully committed to VR. On May 21st of 2019, Oculus did something that I physically thought was impossible, totally unprecedented. They released 2 separate VR headsets on the exact same day. Why? For some reason, Facebook thought this was a good idea. And honestly, this didn't really help matters very much. It just kind of made things a little confusing for the consumer that just wanted a VR headset. On the one hand, you had the Oculus Rift S, which was only a souped up version of the original Rift. And then you had the Quest 1, which was a totally different beast altogether. Whereas the Rift S always felt like it was piggybacking off the Oculus Rift, the Quest 1 really was its own thing. It was able to stand on its 2 legs on its own. Oculus released games like Titanic VR and Blade and Sorcery, which were 2 games that were most notable during this time, but they were both backwards compatible with the original Rift. So it's not like you felt the need to upgrade during this time, because the games would also be available on the last generation VR headset. So what was really the point of upgrading to the Rift S? You'll see it later on down the line, and I'll mention this when it comes up, but Oculus just wasn't that confident that they could keep getting people to buy their new VR headsets, apparently, because they would make their games backwards compatible with the last generation of headsets. So there wasn't really anything drawing people to their new headsets when they'd come out, because they would just be available on the last generation. So why buy the next one? But not all the games that were released for the Rift S were backwards compatible with the original Rift. There was Lone Echo, which was exclusive to the Rift S. But this was kind of an issue, that this was the only one that was of note that was exclusive to the Rift S. You need people to want your technology that you release, and Oculus just wasn't doing that. Thus, the sales of their VR headsets weren't as good as they should have been, and they could have easily boosted the sales of the VR headsets if only they released more exclusive content. Now, with the Quest 1, which, need I remind you, released on the exact same day, there were a few good exclusive VR experiences with the Quest 1. Those were Robo Recall, Super Hot, and Pistol Whip. Super Hot is a really good VR experience, and for it to be exclusive to the Quest this time around, that was a good call, because it makes it a little more worth it to buy the Quest 1, because you have this great VR experience and all of them that came before, because this was completely backwards compatible with all of the previous games. But if you wanted to buy this just for Super Hot, because you already had a Rift S, it's not really worth it. And that's the problem that Facebook had with Oculus. They were really struggling to try and make VR worth it to people. And with the next generation of VR, that is where they will really shine. But first, let me get this out of the way. On May 28th of 2019, Valve got into the mix with their Valve Index, and Valve didn't really have very many exclusive titles for their Valve Index. They kind of just felt like they were just following in the other company's footsteps. You had an amalgamation of games that were already available on other platforms like the Quest, the Rift, and the PSVR, and the fact that Valve just kind of took some of their games and put them on their platform with no real reason to buy their platform over the others. It's kind of a half-assed VR experience. You had games like Blade and Sorcery, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, Job Simulator, and stuff like that, but you didn't really have any purely Valve exclusive titles. What these other VR headsets had over the Valve Index was that they had exclusive games, and Valve did not have that. They may have had exclusive games, but they weren't good. And that's a real shame, because it would be nice to have the VR space not completely occupied by two multi-billion-dollar corporations. After the terrible... Wait, no, that's a bit harsh. After the not great sales of the Valve Index, we'd have another VR headset by Oculus, which would really get the ball rolling for them as a company and for the leaps and bounds that they made in VR. The Oculus Quest 2 came out in 2020, and as of this recording, has only been out for 2 years. And in those 2 years, Oculus, or Facebook, I guess, or Meta, it's actually called Meta. Meta has released many original Oculus games for this platform. In this short time frame, we've gotten games like The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, Half-Life Alyx, and Resident Evil 4 VR. These are much more expansive VR games in comparison to what has come out before, and this is why I would say that from the last generation of VR headsets to this generation, we have seen quite the leap in quality. Instead of short and very to-the-point experiences that only last an hour or so, we have full-blown games that can last anywhere from 8 to 12 hours, and this is what I want VR to be more like. It's not there yet, because these games are few and far between, but VR is definitely heading in the right direction. The Oculus Quest 2 kind of has the same problem as the Rift S, in that with the previous generation of platform, it kind of relies too heavily on the Quest 1, and I wish it was more original content. A few examples of what I'm talking about is there is Blair Witch, Mission ISS, Population, and these are all backwards compatible with the original Quest, and I feel like that's kind of a scapegoat, and just in case people don't upgrade. VR is a good investment. You just gotta be able to sell people on it. I'm sold. The majority of people aren't. So when you rely too heavily on what came before, it's like you don't have faith in your own concept. And I would love to see them just make more original Oculus Quest 2 content instead of relying so much on the original Quest and their other VR headsets. It seems like they're developing more exclusive content for the Quest 2 with stuff like Zenith and The Last City and Green Hell being exclusive to the Quest 2. So hopefully they go more in that direction, focusing more on their present systems and just developing for that instead of just relying on the back catalog. So I'm hopeful to see where Oculus goes in the future from this point forward. VR is a concept that I'm kind of fascinated with. It's an experience unlike anything that I have experienced in my lifetime, and I'll probably never experience anything like that going forward. And for this to be a platform in which people play mostly video games is so cool to me. I love the feeling of being completely immersed in a world that is fictional, and just having the feeling of being placed in a video game and having it feel real is super surreal, and I really, really like it, and I can't wait to see where it goes next. Sometimes when I play video games and I'm just sitting on a couch and playing a game projected on a screen, sometimes I wish they were a little more immersive. And with VR, I get that. I get that immersion. And that is something that is just so cool to me. The fact that you can make a 360-degree view of a video game is so cool. And I really wish people would give VR more of a chance, because I feel like VR would be a fantastic platform to invest in and make more video games for, because this could balloon into something really, really cool if people just gave it a chance. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.